Keith Nestor, thanks for being here with us. I'm interested in your decision to not do virtual interviews, because we're doing this virtually, and there's a cost to doing virtual
Yeah.
interviews, and I don't know exactly how to phrase it, what that cost is, but there is. Maybe especially for Catholics, I don't know. Being in person, the physical is important. So why'd you do that? And are you happy with the decision?
Well, you're talking about moving from virtual to in-person
Yeah.
interviews.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very happy with the decision, because I've found that when you're sitting across a table from someone or just sitting in the same room with them, that conversation can go to a different level of familiarity and a different level of interaction, where when you do things virtually, unless you know the person, like you and I know each other, we've sat down together, we've hung out, so I feel very comfortable with you. But especially if it's someone that we don't know each other very well, it can become very sterile
Yeah.
really quickly. And you can just get into this mindset where you feel like you're doing a production rather than you're having a conversation with someone. And I really wanted to move into that place personally.
You know, as you were saying that, it makes me think that there's a lot of YouTube Catholics now who their primary access to the faith is actually a virtual access. I don't think that's good. I think I mean, I am super glad you can go get Scott Hahn's conversion talk on YouTube. I'm not against that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if the primary place where you're engaging with the Catholic faith is virtual, that might be a problem.
I agree with that 100%. Where the rubber meets the road with me on that side is when people contact me and they want to involve me in their experience somehow. They want to say, "Hey, I have these questions. I'm going through this issue. Can we have a conversation? Can we talk about the things that I'm going through?" And I do that with people when I can. But what I always tell everybody is, look, I'm a guy that makes videos on YouTube and writes books and gives talks, but I'm not in your life. I'm not able to sit with you and know your story in the way that like your local priest can, or a local person who can get to know you, because our interactions are going to be pretty contained
Yeah.
if we do it this way. And especially if you're just watching videos that I'm editing and producing, it's much better to have real life interactions with people who know you and can walk with you through the faith in your everyday life. But when we just rely on our internet resources, we miss something there with that.
Yeah, and then I think you can get unbalanced. Like, you can start going down the rabbit hole of I actually think that this happens with a lot of young people. Well, maybe people of all age, I don't know, but they start following the internet thread, and then you run into the person who's got the conspiratorial mindset, and then the person who's angry, or the person who tells you the church since the Second Vatican Council has been falling into error, and now you're in trouble. Now you're in big trouble.
Well, yeah, because anybody can make videos.
Yeah.
Anybody can get on YouTube and say whatever they want to say. And there's really no accountability for that. There's really no relationships at stake when we do that. And I think it has its place. Obviously, that's what I love to do. But we can't substitute that for real life discipleship. That's
Yeah.
something that's going to take place at its core when we are in each other's lives and we know each other and we see the good and the bad. We can share things, because like when I make a video, I will never talk about things that where I feel inadequate about, because if I'm going to make a video, I'm going to go learn about it. But there's something to be said if someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, Keith, I've got a question about this. What do you think about this?" And if we're I can say, "I don't really know. Let's explore that together. Let's learn from one another." Or they might say, and this happened to me recently, which I thought was really cool. We had some folks that were here with us to do some ministry in person, and they spent a few days with my wife and I. And towards the end of our time together, it was a husband and wife. The wife pulled my wife aside and said, "Hey, can I just talk to you about marriage? Because I've been watching your marriage and I've been seeing things the way that you guys interact with each other, and I would love just to talk with you about that." That's not the kind of thing you're going to get just from here's
Right.
a video.
Right. Yep. That's right. Yeah. So you go out and you pray the rosary with people, like you're a rosary crusader. And so just tell me about that experience. What's it like to pull into a town? And I don't know. It seems like what you do is you just drive up to a parish and people show up and pray the rosary. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but that seems like what you do.
It's pretty close. So the way it began was we started this online live stream prayer community in 2020, right as the pandemic began. And it started off as every day we would pray the rosary together virtually, and people started showing up. Well, as the pandemic dragged on, we had this sense that we felt isolated from other humans. We knew that other people did as well, because a lot of people that were drawn to our community were shut-ins. They were people who were lonely or whatever. I mean, we have the full gamut of people. And we had this idea, wouldn't it be cool if we could travel around and go and meet these people in person, because we started to form this community. So my wife and I decided to sell our we ran a photography business for a while, and we sold our studio that we had, and we bought this Sprinter van Winnebago RV. And then what we would do would be, when we would travel for speaking events or conferences or whatever, instead of flying, we would drive the van, and then we would stop along the way. We'd tell people, hey, we're going to be in Kansas City, or we're going to be in Los Angeles. And then we would just announce where we were going. People would email us and say, hey, here's where I live. Can you come by? And then we would just tell those people, okay, your job is to find us a place to pray and invite your friends. And then they would do that. They'd line up a spot for us to go. Sometimes it'd be a parish. Sometimes it would be a park. Sometimes it would be a business. And we would just roll into the town really on our own. We didn't charge money. We didn't have a big contract or anything like that. It's not like a paid speaking event. We just roll through, and then people would show up to pray the rosary. Now we started that in 2021. I think we've done 7 or 8 cross-country trips that way since then. And it's been amazing. We've loved every second of it. So sometimes we get to go to places that can't afford to hire a Catholic speaker to come into town. Some of my favorite places to be, Cy, have been in small churches of 50 people, and places that don't have big budgets and things like that. And the people are so thankful and grateful. And sometimes people, when they hear we're coming, people will drive for hours to come, and then we live stream from those places, and we really get to experience this community that has become so strong over the last 5 years. And in April of next year, we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary of the Rosary Crew, as we call it. And we're renting a retreat center near Chicago. And then we're saying, hey, we're having a celebration anniversary party, and people are flying in, and we're renting out this retreat center. We're having our own little mini
oh man,
I don't want to really necessarily call it a conference, but it's kind of like a mini reunion.
Yeah. When's that going to be?
April 10th and 11th.
Oh, very cool.
2025. So it'll be our 5-year anniversary of doing the rosary. We've done it every single day since March 18th of 2020.
And boy, isn't it funny how God works? Because you didn't plan on this. Is not like, I've got a plan. Here's Keith Nestor's plan. I'm going to build up this rosary ministry. This is just like you start praying, and the Lord has a plan for it.
I never would have planned to do this. Even when I became Catholic, I mean, I was praying the rosary on my own, but I felt really out of my element being someone who was leading the rosary as a brand new Catholic. I didn't even know how you would lead that. So I was very, very insecure about that, but I've learned and grown over the years doing this. But it's interesting. Sometimes, we'll pull into a town and we don't always know where we're going to sleep. But the good thing about being in the van is we're pretty self-contained. So we might show up to a town and they might have a spot in a church parking lot. We can stay the night. Sometimes not. So we'll wind up in Walmarts. We'll wind up in Cracker Barrels. We'll be on a rest stop or on the side of the road someplace. We never know. And that's what's kind of exciting about it too. It's just, I feel sometimes like a traveling, when the church was beginning to grow and people were just going off on their own, and they had to really trust the Lord for whatever they needed that day. That's what it feels oftentimes like out on the road, because you don't know you don't know ahead of time what you're going to have as far as what you need. So sometimes we go and we're like, okay, we've got enough money to make it to the next place. And then people, through, their kindness, will buy us gas cards or they'll donate to us or whatever. But we're very clear on the rosary stuff. We don't charge like an upfront fee to come pray. sometimes priests are a little bit weary. They don't know who we are or what we're doing. We'll show up and they'll be like, who are you? What's the catch here? What are you trying to do?
What's
And
the
we're just
catch?
like, yeah, because there's always a catch for
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
right?
right.
So when they find out, I've had plenty of conversations with priests who maybe it's someone in their parish that prays with us. And when they go to their priest to say, hey, can Keith and Estelle come and pray the rosary? They're like, well, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's the catch? What are they going to do? And I'll talk to the priest and they'll be like, how much is this going to cost me? And I'll be like, not a dime. Well, what are you going to try to do? What are you selling? What are you? And I'm like, nothing. We just show up and we pray. And they're like, you're just going to show up here and pray. And I said, you don't even need to let us in the building. We can do it in the parking lot if you're uncomfortable with that. And I've really gotten to see some really interesting things. You know, we had one priest who was a little bit leery of us coming because he didn't know it. And I was totally fine with that. I understand. And we went to mass at his parish, and then we prayed the rosary in like a parish hall, like across the parking lot. And he ducked in and he was part of it with us. And I got to see this guy, this priest, his demeanor completely transformed. And as we were wrapping up, he just said to me, he said, this is amazing. I had no idea what this was all about. And then he went back into the church, and I don't know what he did, but he came back and he gave me like $50 and said, here, you know, buy a tank of gas or what. And I was like, wow, that was so amazing. We didn't ask for that. We didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people just are generous like that because I think they recognize that our purpose, we don't have another agenda. We're not trying to recruit you for something or to sell you something or to get you to volunteer for something. We're just here to pray. And that's what I love about that. And it's been such a community building experience. I can't wait to get back out there to do it again.
Well, I want to ask you two things about that. First of all, then, what's the state of the Catholic priesthood? Like, what do you make of these priests that you meet? Do you have a?
Yeah, most of the time, I am so thankful and grateful for the priests that we get to meet. I've had some incredible experiences, and we've got to know and form really close relationships with some amazing priests. Yeah. So I feel great about that. There are some that we haven't really interacted with that much because they're so busy, and they just, maybe the person who they know that brought us to them, they just trust them and say, hey, okay, if you're handling this, cool. And they'll come up and say hi and always ask them to bless us and pray for us. And that's fine too. But I have yet to meet a priest out on our Rosary Crew trips that I haven't just been blown away by as far as the work that they're doing. I'm feeling great about that.
That's I feel confident asking you that question because I have that experience as well. And I feel like the Catholic community needs to hear people say it. People who get out and go parish to parish. And that's, you do that much more than I do. But in my experience, I have really come to appreciate the Catholic priesthood as an amazing institution. Like, these guys, they're not getting anything out of this. You could say to people, okay, what's the angle to the priest? And there's no angle. I get no wife. I get no family. I make lousy money, not lousy money, but and people complain about me all the time. The media depicts me as a creep and a weirdo. I think I'm amazed by them.
I am too, Simon. I think that's why I have a lot of grace for when we roll up or we talk to someone and they have their guard up, because I think priests are used to being taken advantage of. They're used to being, I don't want to say abused, but they're used to being treated in a way that is very self-serving from other people. So I can understand. And here's what I love about that, about some of their attitudes towards me when they don't know what we're doing. I like it when priests are protective of their flock.
Yeah. Right.
And they don't want just any person coming in trying to expose their people to something that they're not comfortable with. So for me, I'm happy when a priest is like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you and find out who you are and what you're doing. Because if I'm going to have you interact with my people, I need to know that you're okay. So sometimes they'll ask me for a letter from my priest or a bishop, and I provide that and I'm always happy to do that because I want our priests. I think our priests as shepherds, their job is to feed and to protect us. So when someone from the outside is coming in, they need to make sure that they approve of that. So I never get offended when a priest is kind of like, give me the third degree. I get it. And I actually I usually thank them for that, because that's what I want my priest to do too.
All right. So the other thing you have then, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you have all that immediate contact from parish to parish or town to town,
Yeah.
do you come away worried about the Catholic Church, upset about the state of the Catholic Church, depressed? What's your feeling about the state of the Catholic Church?
Most of the time I come away impressed. I always come away thankful.
Yep.
But sometimes I come away feeling like, man, if only more people really knew what was going on with this. If only more people, and I say more people, I don't necessarily mean more Catholics, I mean more non-Catholics. If more people who don't understand the beauty of the Catholic Church, who just buy into the narrative that the Catholic Church is some weird, out of touch organization that only cares about money or controlling people, if they got to see what we see, I'm convinced that more people would want to be a part of it. So we get to interact with a lot of people who are on fire for the Catholic faith, and that always makes me even more on fire. So whenever we come back from these trips, we are generally we're tired, but we're so thankful because we've got to meet so many amazing Catholics as we travel the country doing this. And it's exciting because then we know when we go back out, we're like, oh, we'll get to see so-and-so again. We'll get to go here and see these people again. And it's truly one of the coolest things about being Catholic is the universality of it. And you never really get to experience that until you travel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you travel, and it's one thing to travel on these big pilgrimages, like we're getting ready to go to Poland on Monday, and then we're going to go to Italy in January, and that's a different world. But when you're traveling just around America, in the small towns and in the cities, from regular parish to regular parish, and you still get to experience that Catholic community, there's nothing like it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I wonder, do you tell people that? Like when because I think you should I'm going to give you advice right now. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take it from you.
I think you should tell people that because people think, well, yeah, in my town, we have a good pastor or a pretty good pastor. And, and there's this beautiful, but the church is a wreck. And I feel like people that are like you who are seeing it in place to place need to tell people, look, there's people just like you in the next town over, and then the next town over that. And then you go to Poland or Italy or wherever you're going, and then they're doing the same thing. They have the same, when you see when the Eucharist is elevated, the same spirit is in them as in you. I feel like you need to tell everybody that, Keith.
I agree with you 100%. One of the coolest things about what we get to do with the Rosary Crew is that when let's say we go to a town, we went to Houston, Texas, and we went to a big parish there. And there were people that drove there because of our online presence, that they follow us online, but they're not necessarily part of that parish. So they'll drive. And then what happens is when everybody comes together, now they're all connecting around the Rosary Crew. Like, oh, I pray, you pray. And they don't go to the same parish, but now they're instantly connected to each other in real life. So we've seen people that have become really close on a personal level, that the Rosary Crew brought them together, and that's really awesome. So we're seeing these connections being formed all across the country from Catholic to Catholic. It's not just these little silos of each parish, sometimes even in the same town. Recently, we were in New York, like upstate New York, in a really small chapel. It was a parish that's been closed down, but they still use it as a chapel. Like they have mass there, I think, like once a month. It's really old. And we were up there, and the priest came out to let us use the place. And the woman that knows him, she brought us together, and there were people that came from all over the place. And when they came in, it was like, oh, there were people that attended the same parish that didn't even know each other in person because they went to different masses.
Right.
But they pray together on the live stream with us, so they were able to connect in real life, and they're from the same parish. Sometimes that happens and they're from the same town or the same state. And that's what's so cool about it. So I'm always blown away by the relationships that not just we get to make, but that people get to make with each other through that.
Yeah. Why would somebody ask you about your marriage? What do you have in your marriage that people want?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a good question. This particular person wanted to really talk to my wife about it, because one of the things that was happening was, my wife was really sick while they were here. And so she was trying not to touch their food. We were making food for people. I love to cook. So when people come visit me, I usually smoke meat for people and make stuff for them. So I was doing a lot of that. I was doing kind of more of the hands-on hospitality stuff, which My wife loves to do that, but she was trying to be, cognizant of the fact that she was fighting a cold. So what was happening was, as we were doing this, she kept thanking me for, oh, thanks for doing that, Keith. Thanks for taking care of that. Thanks for doing that. And this person said to Estelle, they're like, I've noticed that you're always thanking each other. And I was thanking her for, she helps with the tech stuff in our situation. And I was thanking her for doing that. So my wife and I we have learned over the years that part of one of the best things that you can do in a marriage is show each other appreciation. Because the worst thing you can do in a marriage is take each other for granted. So one of the best ways to combat taking each other for granted is to thank each other and appreciate each other and just say things like that. Hey, thanks for taking care of that, or thanks for helping me with that. And that was something that really ministered to this person. They were like, I don't typically think to do that, but I really want to do that in my marriage. How did you get to that point? So that was that particular example.
That's great because it's marriage is a service. I think sometimes a marriage, like if you have a marriage where the two of you are behaving in that way, that actually can be kind of shocking to the world now. Like I feel like that's one of the ways. Okay, you really want to make an impression on the world. Have a genuinely, and it's not easy. I'm not saying like you just flip a switch overnight, but have that marriage, and the world will be shocked by it. Even people in the church will be shocked by
it. And that's the kind of thing that you don't get to experience if your whole life is lived watching a YouTube video,
Yeah,
But
right.
when people come together in community and experience that, like my wife and I are part of a marriage ministry in our town that's based on small groups that we're going through a book called The Rule, based on the spirituality of St. John Paul II. And some people in our town decided they wanted to start these marriage groups. So we're part of like a group. I think there's like 5 couples in our particular group. And we get together every single week to go through stuff, to talk about marriage and to learn about the faith and in that context. And because we do that every week, now I feel like we've got these closer relationships with other married couples. And there's some that are older than us, some that are younger than us. And we can learn from each other and grow together and help support each other in ways that you can't do if it's just, oh, I want to learn this material, I'm going to take an online course, or
Yep.
I'm going to watch a video, or I'm going to listen to a podcast. That stuff all has its place, but there's nothing that can take the place of genuine community. And that happens best when you can interact with each other in lots of different contexts.
Yeah. And it's getting harder because there are fewer and especially, we're of a certain age, but like the young ones coming up today, no, almost nobody's married until 30, and so there's not a community of people. Say you're normal 25-year-olds who want to get married, and somehow you're the outlier now. There's not a community of people to go, oh yeah, I go through this. We go through the same thing. Because in marriage, I think one of the things that you can do, or at least that I do, is, and I used to, I think I've gotten out of the habit a little bit, is you think, oh, this is a uniquely kind of bad thing that we had that's going on in our marriage. And then you talk to other people and go, oh yeah, we go through that all the time. And then you kind of feel like, oh, okay, if it's supposed to be this way, then I'm okay with it. If it's not supposed to be this way, then I'm super stressed out about this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we do in our group is we talk about our highs and our lows and our God moments, and people are genuine in that, and they will share. They will share if they're going through something and they're struggling with something so they can get encouragement. Back to your point, though, about all the single people, that's one of the things that hurts my heart more than anything is when I see it. I know a lot of really awesome single Catholic people who want to grow in their faith. Their faith's the most important thing. And they sense that they have the vocation of marriage, but they are struggling to find someone of their like-mindedness because they've chosen to not go the way of the world and the hookup culture and trying to find someone based on these worldly things. They want someone who shares their faith. And so they spend all their time at mass and church things, but they struggle to find that other person. That's something that I wish we had a better way of dealing with that. But that's part of the thing is the sacrifice of doing things God's way sometimes might mean that you have to be a little more patient or a little more, I guess, discerning in that area.
But you and your wife, you also went through a series of religious conversions it's not like you came to marriage like we're both solidly this, and then you persisted in that. You've gone through a series of religious conversions. Has that been stressful on the marriage? What does that do?
Oh, yeah, we've gone through a lot of conversions, some religious, some just in terms of our relationship. I mean, we've been through it in our marriage. I mean, we've been married 27 years now, 28 years, 28 years. And I mean, there was a period in our marriage, we almost got divorced. It hasn't always been great. It's great now, but we've gone through a lot of things, Si. And I will tell you this, becoming Catholic was the best thing that ever happened in our marriage. But that was hard in and of itself because my wife was raised Catholic-ish. She was kind of raised culturally Catholic, but it wasn't really a part of their life. And when she met me, we were kids. I mean, I was 20, she was 19. I basically pulled her out of the Catholic Church and said, come with me to my Protestant megachurch. And she was like, what do I care? And she came to it and she loved it. And we got married and ministry, all those things. And then years later, when I became convinced that Catholicism was true, and I came to her and said, look, I need to become Catholic. I knew this was going to be weird for her because it cost her a lot to leave the Catholic faith, even though she really didn't care about it. But her family, friends, they all thought she went crazy when she wasn't Catholic anymore. And then now, after 22 years of being the pastor's wife and all this stuff, now she's got to let go of that identity because her husband's becoming Catholic. So she had to decide what she was going to do in that situation. And she ultimately decided to come with me into the Catholic Church, but not because she wanted to, because she wanted to be Catholic. She felt like that's what she needed to do to be a good, godly wife and an example to our kids who were teenagers at the time. So she sort of came in begrudgingly and struggled with it for quite some time before God gave her her own conversion experience, which I think is way more interesting than mine.
Yeah.
But that was its own deal. And then, but through that, we've become so close and so intertwined. I mean, I really can sense the difference in our life between we were married outside the church, but then when I came into the church, part of that process was we needed to get married inside the church. And when we did that, I really could sense the grace that came from that side.
Yeah.
Some people look at that as like an obstacle. They're like, oh, it's another hoop you got to jump. You got to get your marriage stuff figured out. That's lame. Why can't the church just overlook that? But for us, when we decided to have our marriage done in the church, I sensed a huge outpouring of God's grace on us in that moment. And then eventually my wife became on fire for her Catholic faith, and she loves the Lord and she loves being Catholic too.
I feel like I can very much identify with you with the sense of the graces being poured out by the Catholic Church. And my wife and I, she was an atheist when we got married. She's now a Catholic, and I was a Catholic who became Catholic. I was Catholic, but I still needed to become Catholic. And I do not know how my wife heard about this, but the consecration, the Louis de Montfort consecration to Mary.
Oh yeah.
And we did that consecration together, and I can't describe. It's very hard. It would be very hard for me to convince anyone or explain to anyone what it means when grace just pours into your marriage. And this is the truth of the Catholic Church. And I mean, my job is to be a communicator, a Catholic communicator. I don't know how to communicate that to people. I don't know how to convince them, trust in what the church is offering. It really, it's miraculous what it does.
It is. I mean, it is a sacrament. It's a means of grace.
Yeah.
It's not just a power trip that the church has to control people. It's a means of grace. The best thing you can do for your marriage, if you're not sacramentally married in the Catholic Church, is to get that done. I talk to so many people who are interested in Catholicism, but they say, oh, I can't come into the church fully because my spouse is not on board with this and I don't want to rock the boat. So I just kind of have to sidle up to Catholicism. But I'm afraid to broach that subject with them. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, look, do whatever you have to do to get that taken care of, to work through that. Play whatever chips you have to play, do whatever you have to do, get them to agree to do that, whatever it takes, because that is oftentimes, because people are like, well, my husband or my wife, they're still against the Catholic Church, so they wouldn't want to do that. And what they need to understand is getting your marriage done in the church and receiving that grace, that's going to lead to that effect that you want. It's going to help. It's not going to hurt. But a lot of people are afraid to go there because it sounds so weird, because then you have to have that conversation. Well, what are you trying to say? Or does our marriage not count? Is it not real?
Right.
And I get that, because I had those conversations too. And I remember feeling like, man, this is not going to go well when we have this talk. But by the time we were at that point, my wife was just like, okay, I know that you really want to do this. And she wasn't going to hold up anything. She wasn't going to be like, well, I'm standing in the way. Even though she wasn't quite fully there, she was willing to do that because she saw that I was fully there. And I think sometimes people underestimate that in their marriages. If you have like a mixed marriage and some people are like, well, my spouse, they're going to resist what I do in the Catholic faith. So it's almost like there's these two options. Either they have to convert and become fully Catholic right now, or I have to not become Catholic at all. And I'm like, there's a third option. And the third option is show them how important this is to you. And because they love you, they will not want to stand in your way. But don't force them into anything they're not ready for, and to be like, well, hey, guess what? If I'm going to be Catholic, that means you have to be Catholic. The church allows for that situation because it's merciful and understands that sometimes the way that people can come to a greater understanding of grace is to be exposed to a smaller understanding of grace. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
And through that smaller understanding of grace, it unlocks a greater level of that. I saw that in my own life and in our marriage. I saw that when my wife would come into Mass, not because she wanted to be there, but because she knew I wanted to be there, and she was willing to sacrifice that for me. And I knew that I couldn't argue her into the Catholic faith or to care about it more. But here's the beautiful thing, Si. I didn't have to do that. God did that. The Blessed Mother did that. And through her willingness to crack the door a little bit to that experience and to start to pay attention and listen on her own, she had to get to that point. But through that experience, God did a thing. He opened the door to her in that grace. And I'm watching this conversion happen in front of my eyes that I'm not doing. Part of our problem is we want to control everything. We want to engineer this situation. We want to say, how do I get my son or my daughter or my spouse to become Catholic? You can't do that. God does that. But God can use you to show them why it's made a difference in your life. And when they see that, that might open that door. I see that all the time. I'm seeing it right now in a few other situations that are so amazing.
Yeah.
And I give thanks to God. And most people, they don't give God enough credit with that.
That could be the title of a book about Catholicism. God did a thing. I know you love, because you were a Protestant pastor and youth pastor and all that, and you have an abiding love for the Protestant communities that you were a part of. And so it's not like with trying to argue somebody into something, but there's a kind of sadness I feel, and I wonder if you feel it, about the sacraments being treated as like works of the law or something. And you want to say, no, what a sacrament is total abandonment to God doing something. I'm not doing anything. Like I guess theologically, I shouldn't say I'm not doing anything, but I mean, basically what I'm doing is I'm showing up and letting God operate on me. And when he operates, he actually gives you what he said he was going to give you. Like and this I think we need to convince more Catholics of. Like, if you will open yourself to it, the sacraments work. But this is we have debates and arguments and all that and between Catholics and Protestants. But I think at the fundamental level, what the Catholic who has experienced the power of the sacraments would like to say is, please don't think this is some kind of work of the law or magic that we're talking about. God promised things and he does them. We don't do them. Anybody really, really does them.
Amen. that's the thing that we have to get our focus off of.
Hey, just want to briefly interrupt this interview to let you know that each weekday we go live for 2 hours to answer your questions about the Catholic faith. You can join us 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday, right here on YouTube, or find the episode after in the live tab, or you can find us on your favorite podcast platform, or just go to our Catholic Answers app. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment. Help us grow and reach more souls with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
We have to get our focus off of the sacraments as something we do. They're something we receive, but the sacraments, and maybe this is wrong, I don't know, you could ask a better theologian than me. I don't look at the sacraments as something that, like a work that I do. I look at the sacraments as a work that God does in and through me and to me, oftentimes without my full understanding or even the ability to really grab it. And a great example of that is confession, of course, because, I've had people ask me, why do you guys have to confess your sins to a priest? And whenever I hear that, I'm like, you do not understand what confession is about. Confession is not a have to, it's a get to, because I've talked to so many people, and I've experienced this myself, who have received such a tremendous level of healing from the Lord through that sacrament. They've been to therapy, they've been to rehab, they've done everything they can kind of do that the world has thrown at them, and none of it has had anywhere near the effect as receiving the sacrament of reconciliation. And that's a gift that God gives us. But the world is so wrapped up, especially a lot of Protestants are wrapped up in this idea of, well, you don't do anything to work to earn your salvation. So they'll take that to the extreme, and they'll find anything that you do at all and say, no, you're trusting in yourself. You're trusting in your salvation for yourself. It's not at all what we're doing. It's not at all what we're doing at all. We can't do that. I can't make a sacrament in and of myself. I can't baptize myself. I can't marry myself. I can't consecrate the Eucharist and give it to myself. I can't confess my sins to myself. I can't give holy orders to myself. Not that I'm going to do that. I can't give myself the, extreme unction. That's not anything I can do. So why do we feel like everyone is accusing us of doing all this work through the sacraments? We've got to do a better job showing people that these are an act of God.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably have spoken to confirmation classes, and I feel sometimes like, has anyone told these young people, like, this is something God's going to do for you? Like, they say things, and I don't really believe in confirming people at 13. It's like they're in a crisis already. You're going to make them just choose whether, please don't increase the crisis. But, you have these 13-year-olds, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I can make that commitment. I'm like, this is a gift. Like, it's not a question about ready or it. Do you want the gift or not want the gift? And here's what the gift has. Like, and sometimes, there's lots of wonderful catechists who are doing great preparation, but I sometimes think we almost forget to tell children, basically, it's just a gift. Like, it doesn't have to become part of your angsty crisis that you're in. It's just a gift. Do you want it or not?
Yeah. Think about baptism for a second. When infant baptism, the infant is a complete recipient of that. And, when people argue, oh, well, baptism is, you have to be an adult so you can have faith, and you have to be able to understand all these things, and you have to be able to consent to all these things and do all these things. We have some sacraments like that you have to be able to understand. Marriage is a good example. You have to be able to understand what it is and consent to it in order for the sacrament to be effective. Same thing with the Eucharist. You need to be able to discern the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. You need to be able to say, yes, I agree with that. I consent to that. That's why we don't commune non-Catholics, because they haven't said that. But there are other sacraments where, like baptism, where another person brings you into this, and it's the act of God. And I think people would probably agree, baptism is, of all the sacraments, the most important one, because that's the one that brings you into the faith. So the most important sacrament that Catholics do, they have, in most instances, they're completely
helpless.
Helpless.
Yep.
And yet we're told all the time that we believe you got to work to earn your salvation, So anyway, I don't want to get off on that because I mean, and you guys
No.
talk a lot about that too, but I'm working on a
Yeah.
video I'm making this morning about that. But
Oh, okay.
it's never lost on me how ironic it is that all the things that we get accused about, earning your salvation, all these things, as a Catholic, I have never felt more in awe of what God does every day to offer his grace to me. And I've never felt more like I don't deserve it, yet he offers it to me.
Yeah.
I've never once as a Catholic felt, well, all right, I did the things. I checked the boxes. God, I guess I'm good now. That's not what it's like.
No, right.
We begin the mass identifying with the person who says, through my fault, through my most grievous fault, begging for mercy. That's the way we come to the cross. That's the way we all come there. The priest, everybody, we all start off on the same playing field saying, God, I'm here because I need your mercy.
Yeah.
We're not coming saying, hey, God, we have done the right things this week, so we now deserve to receive you. We're coming saying, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but say the word and my soul shall be healed. That's what it means to be Catholic. And it's so beautiful. And I just want to shout that from the rooftops because so many people have the wrong idea about it.
Yep. Yeah. I think it is easy to get the wrong. I remember Pope Paul VI said, there's people talk about a difference between being sacramentalized and being evangelized. He said, be careful not to make too clear a difference between that, because if a person believes in the sacraments, they are believing in Christ. Like
They are.
And this is the great Pope of go out and evangelize everybody and share. But it's like, yeah, but this sacramental thing is part of the evangelization. Like that's how you go meet him and kind of, and we do like, it's like the centurion, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. We literally say that because that's what we're approaching as supplicants to him. All right. I want to, you're out on the road all the time. Okay. You give a talk or something, people come up and talk to you after. And,
Sure.
And I have identified 3 questions that I now get asked a lot at the end of a talk. And I'm going to ask, I want you to answer them for me. Will you play?
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, first question. And I get it after every talk because I talk about Jesus a lot. Have you seen The Chosen and what do you think of it?
Oh, yes, I've seen every episode of The Chosen probably at least twice. I love it. But the caveat is I love it because I understand what it is and what it isn't.
Oh, okay.
So to me, I feel like it's an incredible way to relate to God in through things that you normally wouldn't think about. Like, what was it like for the disciples to interact with each other when Jesus is talking? Things like that. It helps me to put myself in that place in my imagination. But if you look to The Chosen as the only way you're going to learn about Christianity, I think it's an incomplete catechism, which it doesn't claim to be that anyway. But
yeah.
I've loved it.
Is part of that, I mean, you're an artist, like you're a musician and a photographer and you smoke meat. I didn't know that. That's an art, smoking meat. It's a pretty good piece of art. It's not just, I mean, sometimes Christian art can be kind of kitschy and it's not that.
Oh, Christian art's the worst. I mean, it's
well, tell Michelangelo that.
I mean popular Christian art. That's what I mean, like modern. I'm like, and I'm not trying to diss anybody, but when I first saw that there was a new series about Jesus, and I saw some of the press for it, I mean, like everybody else, I rolled my eyes. I'm like, here we go again, another, stupid Jesus thing on film, and I don't know what made me decide to watch it at the beginning, but I watched that Christmas thing that they did. That was sort of I think that was like a one-off, which led to the series. And I watched that and I was like, wow, that was really interesting. And I told my wife, I said, I want to show this to you. We watched it. And then I think by that time, season 1 had come out. And after I watched the first episode of season 1, I think my mouth was on the ground. That ending season of episode 1, that ending season of episode 1 where Jesus encounters Mary Magdalene, in the bar. I was just like, I've never seen anything like this before in terms of the portrayal of Jesus
Right.
and the faith. And the more I watched it, the more I was just enthralled with it as art. It's not just I like it because it's about Jesus. I like it because it's entertaining and it's a good show.
That depiction, I'm so glad you said that because I had forgotten that. He puts his hands on her. That's one of the best depictions of Jesus I've ever seen on film. Just that maybe 3 minutes of healing Mary Magdalene. It's amazing.
For me, it was even before that, Si. When she's there in the bar, I hope we're not spoiling it for anybody, but she's there in the bar. She's drinking away. She's about ready to drink her sorrows away. She's just wanted to kill herself. She was led into this place, and you see Jesus from across the room see her, and you see him as he begins to make his way over to her. She has no idea that he is there, that he has chosen her, that he's sneaking up on her, and his eyes are totally fixed on her. She has no idea. That right there hit me, because I thought to myself, how many times in my life have I been just completely just immersed in my sadness or in whatever I'm going through, thinking that this is everything, and God is approaching me whether I'm aware of it or not. And then when that guy goes to hand her that drink and he puts his hand on her hand and he just says, "That's not for you." And she turns and looks at him, and that just hit me like a ton of bricks.
Mm-hmm.
It hit me like a ton of bricks, because I thought, you know what? I've been at rock bottom in my life before, and I felt the hand of God stepping in to save me from myself when I wasn't looking for him, right?
Right.
And that's exactly what we see in that. And then, of course, she runs outside and he continues to pursue her. I love that, because God pursues us. And then when he calls her by name, which she hadn't been called that, she'd been called Lilith. He calls her by name. She immediately stops, and then he comes up and then gives her that greeting where he puts his hands on her like that. It's just, to me, there's so many things in that I could relate to on a personal level with Jesus. And I was like, wow, this is something different, man.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. My second question that people, people come up to me after a talk, after I've answered somebody else's chosen question. I'm so upset about the state of the church. It is killing my faith life. I just don't know what to do. What do you say to people who say that?
I say this, we have to be able to do two things at once. We have to be able to acknowledge that there are problems in the church, because there have always been problems in the church, and there probably always will be problems in the church. So we have to be able to acknowledge that. We can't bury our head in the sand and act like there's no problems, because that's just the nature of it. Okay. So we can do, the first thing is we can say, yep, I understand your frustration. Because I think we can, sometimes when we try to pretend, you've seen some people that do that. They try to act like everything's great. There's no issue. Everything's fine all the time. And anyone who's got an issue, the problem's with them. So we need to do that. But the second thing we need to do is we need to recognize that our practice of our faith is really up to us. It's not, we don't have to stand there and wait for someone to tell us what to do. We can go practice our faith. So I need to be way more focused on not the problems in the church, but the problems in Keith, and focus more on myself and go, okay, yes, the church has got sinners that are a part of it. And guess what? I'm one of them. So before I can sit around and complain about other people, or I think it's more consistent with the gospel to say, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner, and to do the best I can to follow the Lord and to root out the evil in my own life and do whatever I can do to offer myself as someone who's trying to do the right thing in the church. So I think what happens is people, and then here's a practical thing I tell people sometimes. You have to be careful who you're listening to. If all you listen to are the voices that want to tell you how bad the church is on fire, all of the bad things, and make you more angsty and work you up, it's probably not going to be good for you. Those things, some of those things might be true, but there's a lot of other things that are true too. And you have to be making sure that you're protecting your heart from things that are going to scandalize or discourage you. So if there's nothing you can do about it, and this is usually where I come down, because a lot of people reach out to me, and they're like, hey, did you see what this person said in the church? Did you see what that guy did? What? And they'll like yell at me about it. And I'll say, yeah, I know about that. And they'll be like, well, why don't you make videos about that? Why don't you talk about that? When are you going to say something about this or that? And I'm just like, you know what? I think other people have that covered. I'd rather encourage people. I'd rather help people into things that are helpful in their own personal faith. And just me being another voice that's screaming and yelling about all the garbage that's going on in the church, I don't feel called to do that. Now, I'm not saying if there aren't other people that feel called to do that, that's fine. But I feel more led to turn that energy towards what can I do to be more holy myself? And when the Lord comes, will he find faith on earth? I can't control that for other people, but I can sure make sure that when he comes, if he comes, and I'm here, Lord willing, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? When he looks at me, I want him to find faith. So I try to help people to personalize that. But if they're being scandalized, and sometimes you can talk to them, you can see that that's all they are obsessed about. I'll say, you know what? Just take a break from that stuff and get up every morning and read the catechism instead of going on YouTube or instead of going on Twitter. Read the scripture for the day. Read the life of a saint who is going to drive you more into holiness. Focus, and here's the big one. Focus on some way that you can serve other people, because and offer that service, for reparation for some sin that's going on in the church. Be part of the solution. Don't just focus on the problem.
And it's what's striking about you, Keith, though, is that you get a lot of people to watch your videos, and you're not doing all that clickbaity stuff. I feel like, you know what, you're doing Catholic media completely wrong. The way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to be angry, you're supposed to be conspiratorial, and you're doing it wrong, Keith. But you still get thousands and thousands of people who watch.
I agree with that. I am 100% doing it wrong from the worldly perspective, and I know that. And I feel like sometimes in my flesh, I can get a little bent out of shape about that. I mean, the thing that I do that I'm most excited about, the content that I create that I'm most excited about, is also the content that is least consumed. And that is a podcast that I have called Unpacking the Mass, which is a weekly walkthrough of the upcoming Sunday's readings. So it's in essence a Bible study for the upcoming readings, for the purpose of preparing someone to go to Mass and hear the readings and the homily from their priest. It's not a replacement of that. It's a preparatory thing so that when you go into Mass, you've already prepared yourself. Like Jesus would say to people, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Well, step one is to be open to hearing, to be focused on that. So Unpacking the Mass is something I do each and every week. I've been doing it for years. And it's killed my YouTube channel, like algorithm wise. It's starting to grow more and more. But in the beginning, when I was really trying to grow my YouTube channel, I would notice that I could make these videos about Catholic apologetics and about, this doctrine or that doctrine. And sometimes I get pretty worked up about that stuff. But when it came, and people love that kind of stuff. But when it came to the thing that I thought was the biggest need that we have, praying the rosary and studying the scriptures, it was like people were like, oh, I don't really have time for that. That's not as exciting. And you're right. It's not some sort of, it's not going to create anger or anxiety or fear in people, which is the way that you want to grow a YouTube channel. If you want to grow a YouTube channel, make content that creates fear and anxiety in people, and that puts you forth as having the answer to that, and people will tune in. But if you just say, hey, we're going to do something that's completely unsexy, like study the Bible, they'll be like, okay. But here's what I've seen, and this is what I get excited about, Si. The people that do participate in that Unpacking the Mass, the feedback I get from that, their lives are being transformed. Their faith is being transformed. People are telling me how helpful it's been to them more than anything else. I mean, I can make videos just like you guys at Catholic Answers. You guys can make videos too, sort of telling the popular Catholic things that they already know, right? But that's not your mission. You're trying to go after people who are looking for Catholic answers, right?
Yeah, right.
And I'm, because you guys, I do some of that, but because you guys exist, most of the time what I do when people question me and say, hey, Keith, what about purgatory? What about the saints? What about that? I usually just send them to a Catholic Answers video or to a Catholic Answers article, I'll make some of that stuff because sometimes I feel like I have a little bit of a unique take on things just because I'm a little bit unique. But what I want to really help people do is go, okay, let's study the word of God together. Let's understand the scriptures. Let's figure this out. So is that going to blow up my channel? Probably not. But for some reason, God has allowed my channel to begin to grow to, I mean, it's still moderately sized, but I'm just thankful that anybody watches it, to be honest with you.
All right. Well, let me give you I think that's part of. I'm so happy to hear you say that because it is part of the Catholic mission is to not be so focused on worldly numbers like my ratings are up. That to me seems like that's devastating to the truth. If that's what you're worried about, you can't be fully faithful. You can't serve that other master, Jesus, if you're serving ratings.
You got that 100% right. And I think it's so crazy how we lose that sometimes because we think that it's all about those things because it's hard for it not to be because everybody wants to feel like they're being useful, like they're being fruitful and like it matters what they're doing. I get that. I feel that way all the time too. But at the same time, what we have to realize is what our purpose is, what we're called to. And we're not called to necessarily have big worldly ministries. What we're called to is be faithful with the message that God has given to us and to reach people and let him handle that stuff. But it is really hard. I mean, I fall into that trap all the time still. I'm just like, what happened? I worked really hard on this video. Why didn't it blow up? But the other thing I learned too is sometimes it feels like the harder I work on something, the less value it has. But if the Lord just hits me with something and I'm just like, hey, I didn't really have a chance to prepare, but this is something God put on my heart. Boom.
I tell my boss that here all the time. Like, don't make me work because the less work I do, the more effective. But he doesn't buy it. But all right, here's my third question. And this might actually be the most common question that I get after talks and often am baffled at what to say. So I want to hear what you have to say. What can I do to bring my children back to the faith? I don't know what I did as a parent. I don't know where I went wrong, but none of my adult children are practicing the faith, or most of my adult children are not practicing the faith.
I get that. That's the most asked question I get too, Si. And, here's the deal. There's no easy answer to that question because there's no one thing that's going to work for everybody because everybody's different. Relationships are different. Some people have relationships with their kids where they can sit down and really openly share about things. Other people have relationships with their kids where their kids don't care about what they say. But what is universal in that is prayer and also living the faith in front of your kids and everybody else in devotion and in joy. Those are the two biggest things. And then trusting God to work. That's where I think a lot of us fall down. We want to take control of that process. We want to say, okay, God, I've got to figure this out. What can I do to bring my kids back? The reality I'll tell people is this: you can't do anything to bring your kids back. You can only allow God to work through you in the ways that he sees fit. But what you need to do, regardless of whether you have kids or not, is you need to live your faith before them or everybody with devotion and with joy. Because if you take away either one of those two things, it's going to be a disaster. If you take away devotion and you're just kind of I don't care. I don't really practice my faith. I don't go to church every week. I don't fulfill my obligations as a Catholic. Then they're not gonna listen to anything that you say. They're not gonna watch any videos you send them. They're not gonna read any books that you give them. Because if they look at your life and your faith is sort of mediocre to them and it doesn't really affect your life much, they're not going to care. Or if you're like the other kind of person that you're like, no, I practice my faith to the nth degree, but you're grouchy about it all the time. And all it does is make you depressed and grouchy and sour. That's not going to draw them in either. And I think we all know people in both camps. We know some people who are like happy-go-lucky, but they don't really know or care about their faith. And then we know other people that, they wear they look like Mr. T, but they got all miraculous medals on, and they're just like they're in the church praying 50 million rosaries every day, and they're reading, and every other word out of their mouth is about this, that, but yet they don't exude joy.
Yeah.
That's going to have the same effect. People are going to look at that and they're going to say, that's not really for me. So you have to do both, and you have to trust that God is at work in that.
Man, it's so hard to do because I mean, because what I often say to people is I'm in the same boat you are. I'm not. I don't have some brilliant answer to this, but that trusting part is hard. You just want. I mean, that's what you want as a parent, is for your children to be all right. And I know that the safe harbor. The safe harbor in this world is Jesus, and I just want them in that safe harbor.
I'm with you too. I will tell you this. God, you have to play the long game, and you have to trust God, and you have to hit what's pitched to you. Meaning, you've got to have your eyes open, and remember, God has a process in this, not you. And what I mean by that is this: you might have an interaction with your son or daughter where God is priming the pump for you to encourage and equip them in some way. But maybe it's going to happen in a way that you never thought possible.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's going to happen through some kind of tragedy or through some kind of heartbreak that your kids are going through. Or maybe it's going to happen through something that's going to happen in your life that they're going to pay attention to see how you respond to that. What does your faith mean to you when life hands you something difficult? Sometimes it's through those things that none of us would choose. But God chooses to work in and through those things. You have to always ask yourself every day, what does it look like for me to be faithful in this situation right now? Maybe I have a son or daughter who wants nothing to do with me, and I'm not allowed to share the faith. I've had my kids tell me, Keith, or they say, Dad, I don't want to hear it. We're sick of hearing about the Catholic Church all the time. Shut up about it. I have to ask myself, what does it look like in that situation for me to be faithful when they say that to me? I've had other times when they said, we have a lot of questions about this. Can we meet and talk? I have to be faithful in that and say, what do I get to do in this situation? I've had situations where I've said, hey, do you want to come to Mass with me? Or will you come to Mass with me? And they've said, no. Then I've had other situations where they've called me and said, hey, can I come to Mass with you? And so I guess my point is this: it's a roller coaster ride of all kinds of different situations and scenarios. You can't just overlay one thing over that for everybody in all times and all places. And for the love of God, please, and I'm a content creator, you guys are content creators, do not think that the answer is just giving them a book or sending them a video. Do not spam your kids with all the Catholic stuff. It's only going to work against you. And again, I've got books about this, you guys too, but I would rather have nobody buy my book than have my book be used as some way to pound something over somebody that's not ready for it, who is going to just be like, get that away from me. If they're not ready for it, don't think that that's the answer. But yet, why do we do that? Because it's easy, right? I can buy a book. I can just, here, read this. But I remember what it was like when I wasn't Catholic and people wanted me to become Catholic. And every time I turned around, someone was handing me a book or handing me a trinket or handing me a medal or handing me a rose. And I'm just like, what do I do with all this stuff? What I really needed was someone who could show me what Catholicism was, not just give me homework. And that's what we need to do with people.
That's what Devin Schott, right? Kind of.
Oh, yeah.
He did that for you. He was kind of a model of the. I've heard your description of walking into his house, and it was slightly more Catholic than a Catholic church, but he was a Christian, and that struck you that because you didn't think Catholics were really Christians at the time. So, but anyways, I don't know if you want to get into it, but someone who gave you a personal model was the effective thing.
Absolutely. Now, he did give me stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like, we walked through that. I gave him stuff too, because I was trying to convert him to become Protestant. He was trying to convert me to become Catholic. But before I knew he was Catholic, I could already sense that he had a relationship with Jesus. And when those two things came together, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And what he didn't do was say to me, well, Keith, you just believe a bunch of lies about the Catholic Church. here's 5 books you need to read and then come and talk to me later. We met and we talked and we battled and we fought. And there were times when I'm sure that he thought there was no way that I would ever become Catholic. And there were times when I thought, when he had to have thought for sure, this is a lost cause. But he never stopped being my friend.
Yeah.
He never stopped praying for me, and he never stopped being available to me. But what he didn't do, and I think this was huge, he didn't pounce on me every time I let him know that something he said makes sense. Because here's another thing. If somebody starts to agree with us a little bit, maybe you've got a friend or a family member who you're trying to get them exposed to the faith, and they're having a conversation with you, and they might say something that gets you really excited. They might go, "Oh yeah, the Catholic Church. Yeah, the Catholic Church is really beautiful. I love the stained glass windows in the church and the statues, and just the beauty of the Catholic Church is so much more appealing than the strip mall Pottery Barn mega church that I go to." If we hear that, and then everything we do now, we just pile on. Oh yeah, well of course, blah blah. They're never going to let you know that you said anything they agree with. So Devin would allow me just to kind of at my pace, safely, and that's key, safely open my heart to the church, because he didn't pounce all over me every time I said something he agreed with or something I didn't agree with. And this is a lesson that he taught me that I've learned in a lot of interactions with people. I've got a couple of friends of mine right now that are walking through this process. And because of the way Devin was with me, I've learned that I don't have to force a bunch of things. And I also don't have to, the minute that they say something that agrees with the Catholic Church, jump all over that and, hold them down at the fire and say, "No, you should be Catholic now." Like, I've learned to just be chill and let God do God's thing. But at the same time, hit what's pitched. When they want to talk about it, talk about it. When they need more information, be available. When they're ready to take that step and they ask, give that information. When you earn that right, then you can say, "All right, hey, listen." Like, I had a good buddy of mine who was really interested in things, and he loves history, he loves theology. And we were talking one day, and I said to him, "You love to learn about historical Christianity, and you love this idea, like you've romanticized the idea of the early church. Would it be okay if I shared something with you? And you can read it or not read it." And I gave him Joe's book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, because I'm like, this is exactly what he's talking about. But he was sharing that with me. I didn't just, like the first time we met, "Here's 8 books you got to read."
Yeah, right.
It was, "I think this might be helpful for you. Would it be okay? Would you be interested in this?" And if he would have said no, I would have been like, and I would give him that out. "You don't have to do this." But if we just show up thinking that we have this systematic approach to bringing our kids back or bringing anybody to the back, and we just are going to walk them through these steps, like, you see that oftentimes, like on some of these videos with guys like Ray Comfort or Todd Friel, these Protestant guys that go to college campuses and they've got their bullhorns and their microphones, and they'll just go up to random people and they'll ask them these really loaded questions. And it's like they walk them into this situation where the person's totally caught off guard, and they almost trick them into answering these questions. Like, that is an ineffective way to make somebody Catholic. So we have to just be more organic about it and be more led by the Spirit in that.
But do you have many interactions with people who have no faith at all? Like, I think that a lot of, like, I think of your ministry as kind of sometimes. I mean, you have your ministry to Catholics, but there's this kind of bridging evangelical Protestantism and other kinds of Protestantism to Christianity. But do you have a lot of interactions with just people who have no faith at all? And do you have any insight into that?
I do, not as much anymore. So when I quit ministry to become Catholic, I went into the secular workforce. Okay, my wife and I, we ran this photography business, and then I also took a job as like a traveling sales guy consultant for a photography lab that makes like all of the products, like the albums and the canvases and the prints. So I was doing a lot of traveling and interacting with people that had nothing to do with Jesus or church. And I made friends with a lot of people doing that. And even though I wasn't in vocational ministry, I was a brand new Catholic. And people wanted to talk about life. They wanted to talk about, well, tell me about, what you do and this and that. And so through those relationships, I became friends with a lot of people who didn't have any kind of faith background at all. And I really love those relationships even to this day. So to me, I think that's very important. I think we all should be in relationships with people who don't share that faith. Now, how do you do that? Sometimes you got to get out of your bubble. You have to talk to people in your everyday life that aren't part of your church world, that aren't part of your Catholic community. And then the way that you need to do that, God will open those doors to you. So my content doesn't really wind up so much on the radar of like atheists or non-believers. I mean, that does happen sometimes, but that doesn't happen so much through my content as much as it just happens in my life.
Yeah. And then it seems to me like you're a person who, well, let me just put, I think a lot of people have that anxiety. Well, when should I bring Jesus up in this? I mean, like my whole thing is about, and I don't think they actually, and I don't mean this to be insulting. I just think we sometimes who are kind of stuck in that anxiety about sharing Jesus, we don't actually take an interest in the other person. And it doesn't seem like you're that. It seems like I don't know. You seem like a person who likes people.
I love people. And that's how it starts. The way that you share your faith with people, the best way is through a relationship, through a friendship. And the best way to become friends with somebody is to take an interest in them. So when you meet somebody new, start asking about their life. If I run into somebody in an airport or wherever I am, and we just start talking, I'm asking tons of questions about them because that's everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So if you want to have an opportunity to get to know somebody, just start asking them questions about themselves and be genuinely interested in that. And at some point in time, that's going to turn back to you. And you can talk, and maybe you're like an insurance guy or a banker. You don't work in ministry. I mean, it's easy for me to be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a author and a speaker, and I create content about Roman Catholicism. Okay, well, that's easy, right? Sometimes that makes it harder because the instant that they hear about that, sometimes when I talk to people, boom, their walls go up, and they're just like, oh, wait a minute, okay, you're one of those guys.
Yeah.
But I found that I had really fruitful conversations, in some ways, even the most fruitful conversations with people when I wasn't doing that, when I was a photographer, when I would meet with clients and we would talk about their experience or about their kids or whatever, just in the context of our working relationship, we would get to know each other. And you're just a regular person to them like they are. So there's a relatability there. But you have to be willing to have those relationships with people and not be so offended all the time by the fact that there are people that aren't Catholic. Some people are like, oh, I don't want anything to do with them. There's this issue. And I see it less in the Catholic world as I saw in the evangelical world, but sometimes in the evangelical world, the temptation with everything is to create a Christian version of it. So like, for example, that's where like church softball leagues come into play because people want to play softball. They can't just go join a softball league. They got to make a Christian version of that. So we have to have a Christian softball thing. We have to have a Christian motorcycle group or a Christian barbecue group or a Christian, whatever thing you're into. Like there was when I was in ministry, there was a lot of pressure to create these little subcultures for whatever people were into, but just like somehow make it part of the Jesus thing.
It's almost like to keep yourself in a ghetto. Like stay away from.
It's like make a Jesus bubble, and that's the world you live in. And I understand why people want to do that sometimes because they don't want to be corrupted by the world. But I think there's also a time and a place to be salt and light to the world, to go into the world and to share your faith with people in a real, organic, and down to earth way. And you don't get to do that if the only people that you interact with are other people just like you.
I wanted to ask you about something because this is actually something I'm curious about you. So you come from the evangelical world into the Catholic world, and you wrote the book about like how to get through that first year of that, and it's very practical. And so this is the thing I'm curious about you on a practical note. what's it like living with Catholic saints? Like Protestants, I don't think have saint of the day and saints all around them constantly, and a saint, that's you baptize your child. Like, what's it like for an evangelical to start living with Catholic saints?
Well, for me, it's been completely amazing. I know other people that struggle with that. For me, it's been one of the greatest treasures of the Catholic faith to get to learn about these saints and to be inspired by them. You can tell a lot about a person by asking them who their heroes are. And when I was an evangelical, my heroes were megachurch pastors, guys like Tim Keller, Rick Warren, Bill Hybels, these guys that built these giant ministries, these giant churches. They were the guys I looked up to. And okay, they were really good at that. But as a Catholic, it's interesting. My heroes, I love my priests. Okay, they're great. But like my real true heroes, and they would agree with this, are the saints. And when I look at these men and women who the church has declared them to be saints, they haven't made them saints. They've just declared that they are saints. Only God can make people saints. There's such a level of inspiration and power there and community there. One of the things I love about the Catholic faith is the recognition that death has not ultimately separated us from the family of God, the communion of the saints. I've loved it.
And do you have any that are your particular, like have any of them befriended you or in your time as a Catholic?
Yeah. So I hesitate to tell you this, but I'm going to. We have 11 first-class relics in our prayer room here in our house. And that's a whole other story of how that happened. But every day I start my day in a room with these saints, and every night my wife and I end our day in a room with these saints, and it's been amazing. So to me, like my confirmation saint is St. Ignatius of Antioch. I don't have a relic of St. Ignatius of Antioch.
You'd be pretty impressive if you did.
But okay.
Yeah.
I do have a first-class relic of John the Baptist. And yesterday was the memorial of the Passion of John the Baptist. And when we did the Rosary Crew yesterday, I brought the reliquary down here to pray with us on the Rosary Crew. And last week I did a live interview with someone, and we brought Saint Francis of Assisi, who was one of his favorite saints, who I have a relic of Saint Francis of Assisi as well. So these relics have been huge for us. So to me, that's been like these relationships have been incredible, and I'm totally blessed by that.
But that's so different from how you lived before you're Christian. I mean, like there's so much beauty in Protestant Christianity, but that's not part of it. These saints everywhere.
Yeah, it's something that I think they're missing, and I feel badly for them for that, because I've seen how powerful that is. One of the things we got to do earlier this year was when we were traveling, we got to go and spend time with a family that has 3 little girls, and we were meeting this family for the first time, and these 3 little girls were so excited to come talk to us about their favorite saints.
Oh.
And they were showing us their pictures of my favorite saint is Saint Cecilia. My favorite saint is Saint Faustina. And they were showing us drawings of them and beautiful pictures of them. And these little girls were so inspired by these saints. And I'm thinking, this is the greatest thing ever, and I want to share that with my Protestant friends, because I knew who these guys were. I knew who St. Thomas Aquinas was. I knew who Augustine was, but we looked at them sort of through this sterilized lens of, well, they were figures in philosophy or theology, but they weren't really like connected to us.
Yeah.
But it really impacted me how in the book of Hebrews, it talks about this, we are surrounded by this cloud of witnesses.
Yeah. And
that's been a powerful experience. And of course, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the chief of that, she's changed my life. And that was part of how I became Catholic, was an experience I had with her that went around all of the stuff I was working through intellectually and went right to my heart. It was an incredible experience.
You know, it's funny you talk about those little girls with the women saints. Whenever people, Catholic Church is anti-woman or something, one of the things I love to tell people is, the Catholic Church has more buildings named for women than any other institution on earth.
I've never used that. That's a great point.
Like everywhere you go, Catholics have named their buildings after women. So, all right. So let me ask you about Mary and Jesus
Yeah,
before we finish, if I may, because
absolutely.
I think the thing that surprises the convert, and in some way we're all converts, but the surprise of conversion, of the turning of the heart to Jesus, and Mary is the same, because it's the turning of the heart to a person, and then she turns you right to Jesus. I want everybody to know that, but that the surprise, I think, of conversion, when it's conversion of the heart, is what they're like. That is, I always thought you were going to be this way, but you're this way. And that, I think, it's almost like if you've ever known, like, people who go, oh, you should meet Bob. Bob's great. Bob's this, Bob's that. And you're like, I'm sick of hearing about Bob. And, Bob sounds like, I don't know what Bob. And then you meet Bob and you go, oh, that's what Bob is like. This is why this person loves Bob. And so I wanted to ask you before we go, because Keith, I think people strongly sense from you this personal relationship with Jesus and Mary. So if somebody said to you, well, what are they like? How would you answer that question?
Well, I'll focus on Mary because I think there's been a lot said about Jesus. But to talk about what's Mary like, I'll just tell you how it's related to me. I get choked up when I spend time thinking about her. And when it's almost like that's like kind of like my spidey sense, like my Mary sense, is all of a sudden I'll just like get choked up because I've sensed this incredible love from her, this incredible motherly love from her that I can't even put words around. And that's the best way I would describe her, as a motherly love. My daughter, who is not Catholic yet, who was one who was really upset when I became Catholic, and it really hurt her deeply. She didn't understand it. She's a worship leader in a Protestant church. And we've been having these really deep conversations about this stuff. And she asked me one day, I'm not Catholic, but is it okay if I pray the rosary or I ask for Mary's intercession? And I said, absolutely, you can do that. And I gave her a miraculous medal one day. I just felt called to give it to her, even though we had already had the throwdown, years ago about stop with the Catholic stuff. We were in a little different space. And I gave it to her, and she sent me a picture later that day wearing it around her neck, a miraculous medal, and she showed it to me. And I just felt overwhelmed with joy. And then she came over and she was talking to my wife, and we were talking about this, and she said, I was praying and asking for Mary to help me. And she said, I felt a motherly hug, but it wasn't from you.
Yeah.
Looking at my wife.
Right.
I felt a motherly hug that was not from my mother. And at that moment, and there had been some other stuff that had happened around Mary with my daughter that I had been praying for, that had some kind of miraculous things that had happened. But at that moment, I just let go of all of my anxiety over her. And she can become Catholic, she not become all of that. I was just like, okay, Mary's got her.
Yeah.
And I completely trust her with that. So she's a mother. She's a loving mother. And where that intersects with me, it just tends to make me really emotional, which is, I'm not normally that kind of guy.
Yeah, but that, I think, there's I suppose men and women relate to mothers differently, but we both need mothers, and it's so gracious of God that He gave us one.
Amen. I look at her like a gift. I really do. I think about John 19 when Jesus gives her to John. That was not about just making sure she had a place to live. Why does John need to tell us that? First of all, if she had other kids, then that's unnecessary. But Second of all, I mean, John himself tells us there were many things that could have been written that weren't written, yet he includes that. Behold your mother. And from that day on, he took her into his home. There's bigger things going on there than just, well, this is where she stayed the rest of her life. We don't need to know that. But we do need to understand that that was a gift given in that moment at the foot of the cross, that she was given the gift of the church to be her community, of course, in that way, and that role as the mother. But then she was given to the church to be the mother. And that's exactly how I would describe that.
Praise God. Praise God. Keith Nestor, I was so looking forward to talking with you, but it's better than anticipated. I really love speaking with you. God bless you and all the beautiful work that you do.
Cy, thank you so much. I love you guys, and I'm so thankful we got to see you last year when we were in California on our trip, and this has been a blast, and I look forward to getting to see you guys again.
All right. Well, I hope people will find you. By the way, I never even mentioned your ministry, and it's Down to Earth Ministries, right? If people want to find you, they can go.
Sure. So our website's just called Down to Earth, and that's down 2 earthministry.org. And if you just Google me, you'll find it, or you can find me on YouTube. I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and X, all that kind of stuff.
And if you see a van parked in a park and a bunch of people praying the rosary, just come over and say hello.
Absolutely. We love that. We love that. Come find us.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our live streams Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific. Or find the episode after on YouTube, your favorite podcast platform, or our Catholic Answers app.